I spent my life savings on gas, drove through 3 states without sleep, and rehearsed my speech for 800 miles. When they opened the door, I knew instantly something was catastrophically wrong. But it wasn't until I saw what was behind them that I realized this mistake would change everything. Looking back, I thought I was being so smart. 2 whole months of saving every spare dollar, skipping lunch twice a week, walking to work when I could have taken the bus. My bank account looked pathetic most of the time, but I had this vision in my head that made it all worth it. Gas money, motel money, maybe even enough left over for a nice dinner if everything went perfectly. The worst part about planning surprises is how much you overthink every single detail. I spent hours on MapQuest printing directions from 3 different starting points, just in case I needed backup routes. Yes, MapQuest. My phone was ancient and GPS wasn't exactly reliable back then, so I went old school with actual paper directions. Folded them perfectly, highlighted the important turns, even wrote little notes in the margins like Exxon station on left means you're close. Then there's the addresses. I triple-checked everything. Called their workplace pretending to update some random mailing list just to confirm they still lived where I thought they lived. Felt like a detective doing surveillance. Honestly. The funny thing is, I was so proud of being thorough. If someone had told me then that I'd still mess it up, I would have laughed in their face. The fake weekend plans were genius. Or so I thought, sent casual texts about how I'd probably just stay home, maybe catch up on some shows, nothing exciting, they bought it completely. Even joked about how I needed to get out more and stop being such a homebody. Little did they know I was planning the most spontaneous thing I'd done in years. Weekday evenings seemed perfect for this kind of surprise. People are predictable during the week, right? Work ends around 5 or 6, they grab dinner, settle in for the night. None of that weekend chaos where they might be anywhere doing anything. I wanted them home, relaxed, completely unsuspecting. The plan was foolproof. Well, that's what I kept telling myself anyway. I even wrote a backup note just in case they weren't home when I showed up, spent 20 minutes crafting this casual but excited message, explaining the surprise, asking them to call me immediately, the whole thing. Folded it up and stuck it in my jacket pocket like some kind of insurance policy. Made me feel prepared for every possible scenario. The gift bag took forever to put together. Not expensive stuff, but meaningful things. Inside jokes, little trinkets that would make them smile, a card I rewrote 4 times before getting the tone right. Everything wrapped perfectly. Tissue paper fluffed just so. I wanted that moment when they opened the door to be absolutely perfect. What kills me now is remembering how confident I felt, like I had thought of everything that could possibly go wrong and planned around it. Traffic delays, left with extra time. Car trouble, made sure everything was serviced first. Bad weather, checked the forecast obsessively. I was so focused on the big picture problems that I completely missed the tiny detail that would ruin everything. The snacks were practical but also part of the excitement. Trail mix, granola bars, a thermos of coffee I made extra strong, packed them like I was going on some epic adventure instead of just driving to see people I cared about. Even brought a phone charger, though the plan was to keep communication to 0. Couldn't risk anyone accidentally spoiling the surprise with a well-meaning call or text. That last part felt especially important. No calls, no check-ins, no social media posts about being on the road. Complete radio silence until the moment I knocked on their door. The anticipation was supposed to build for me, not leak out and ruin everything for them. I wanted to see that genuine shock and happiness when they realized I'd driven all that way just to surprise them. Makes sense, right? Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. I had contingencies for my contingencies. The budget was tight but sufficient, the timing was perfect, the element of surprise was completely intact. On paper, this was going to be one of those beautiful gesture stories we'd laugh about for years. But here's what nobody tells you about perfect plans. They're only perfect until reality gets involved. And reality has this nasty habit of finding the one thing you didn't think to double-check. The one tiny assumption you made that seemed so obvious it wasn't worth questioning. I should have known something was going to go sideways. Nothing in my life had ever gone exactly according to plan before, so why would this be different? But hope makes you stupid sometimes, and I was running on pure hope that morning when I loaded up the car and started driving toward what I thought would be the perfect surprise. The road ahead looked so promising that day. 5 in the morning hit like a slap, but I was already dressed and buzzing with nervous energy. The car sat in my driveway like a faithful horse, tank topped off from the night before because I wasn't about to risk running low on this mission. My playlist was locked and loaded. 800 miles of driving music that wouldn't make me sleepy or too hyped up, just the right mix of upbeat stuff and mellow tracks to keep me steady on the road. I pulled out of my neighborhood while the world was still dark, streetlights casting those orange halos over empty sidewalks. Coffee shops weren't even open yet. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, and honestly, I felt like some kind of secret agent heading off on a classified operation. Nobody knew where I was going. Nobody could blow this for me. The first stretch went by fast, too fast, really. I caught myself pushing 75 in a 65 zone and had to ease off the gas. Getting pulled over would have been the ultimate irony, right? Spending my surprise money on a speeding ticket instead of pizza and hugs. So I settled into a cruise control rhythm, watching mile markers tick by like a countdown timer. Every 180 miles, I forced myself to stop. Sounds obsessive, but I'd read somewhere that's the sweet spot for staying alert on long drives. Gas station number 1 was somewhere in the middle of nowhere. One of those places that sells lottery tickets and energy drinks but calls itself a travel center. I stretched my legs, did some awkward jumping jacks behind my car, and grabbed a banana that probably cost 3 times what it should have. The weird thing about road trips is how your brain starts playing tricks on you after the 3rd hour. I kept rehearsing what I'd say at their door, running through different scenarios like some kind of method actor. What if they were eating dinner? What if they looked tired from work? What if one of them was in the shower and I had to wait on the porch looking suspicious? Mile marker 400 came and went. My playlist had cycled through twice, and I was starting to recognize billboards from previous trips this way, the same lawyer's face promising to fight for accident victims, the same casino advertising loose slots and free breakfast buffets. American highways are basically one long strip of repeated advertisements, but somehow it felt comforting, predictable. I stopped at a place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 90s. The coffee cost $1, which should have been my first warning, but desperation makes you do questionable things. It tasted like someone had strained it through dirty socks, but caffeine is caffeine, and I needed all the help I could get. Trail mix from my own supply became lunch, cheaper than whatever those places were calling fresh sandwiches behind plastic wrap. The phone stayed silent in my cup holder, 0 calls, 0 texts, 0 leaks. This was harder than it sounds because I'm usually that person who updates everyone about everything. Had to resist the urge to post some vague social media hint about being on an adventure or whatever. The whole point was keeping this completely under wraps until the moment I knocked on their door. Around hour 10, something shifts in your driving brain. The landscape starts looking samurai, highway signs begin feeling personal, and you catch yourself having full conversations with radio hosts who can't hear you. I argued with some talk show caller about pizza toppings for 15 minutes before realizing how ridiculous I probably looked to passing truckers. Mile 600 brought a moment of panic when my GPS seemed confused about which exit to take. 2 different routes showed nearly identical arrival times, and I spent way too long pulled over on the shoulder trying to figure out which one was actually faster. Chose the one that looked more direct, which turned out fine, but those 5 minutes of doubt made my stomach twist up like I'd swallowed a pretzel. The final stretch felt eternal and instant at the same time. Highway hypnosis is real. You zone out for what feels like 5 minutes, and suddenly you've covered 50 miles without remembering any of it. But then you see familiar signs, recognize the skyline, and everything snaps back into focus with crystal clarity. Pulling into their neighborhood felt like crossing some kind of finish line, except the real race was just beginning. My hands were actually shaking as I checked my phone for their address one more time, cross-referencing it with the folded paper in my passenger seat that I'd stared at probably 200 times during the drive. Now came the part where all this planning would either pay off brilliantly or crash into embarrassing disaster. But first, I needed to make sure I was knocking on the right door, because apparently that detail mattered more than I'd ever imagined. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house that was supposed to change everything. After 12 hours of driving, 3 bathroom breaks, and way too much gas station coffee, this was it. The moment I'd been planning for 2 months, the address on my crumpled piece of paper matched the numbers on the mailbox perfectly. 1247. Check. The porch light was exactly the color I remembered from the photos they'd sent me last Christmas, that weird yellowish glow that made everything look like an old movie. The mailbox had their last name painted in those fancy cursive letters that probably cost more than my entire gas budget for this trip. But here's the thing about surprises. They're terrifying when you're the one doing the surprising. What if they weren't home? What if they were having dinner and I interrupted some important family moment? What if they thought I was crazy for driving 800 miles without telling them? My brain started spinning with all the ways this could go wrong, and suddenly sitting in my Honda Civic felt a lot safer than walking up to that front door. I parked 2 houses down behind this massive oak tree that blocked most of my car from view. Smart move, right? Well, I thought I was being clever. The last thing I wanted was for them to spot my license plate through the window and ruin the whole thing. I'd come too far to blow it because of some amateur mistake like that. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister asking how my weekend plans were going. The fake story I'd told everyone to keep this surprise under wraps. I'd said I was staying home, maybe cleaning out my closet, definitely not driving halfway across the country to show up unannounced. The lie felt heavier now, sitting in their neighborhood, but I couldn't back out. Not after spending my last 2 paychecks on this crazy idea. Then there's the whole rehearsal thing I started doing. You know how actors practice their lines? I was doing that, except my stage was the inside of my car and my audience was my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hey guys, surprise. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Too casual. I missed you so much I had to come see you. Too intense. Guess who drove 800 miles because they're completely insane? Too honest. The truth is, I was scared they wouldn't be as excited as I hoped. We'd been texting and calling, sure, but showing up like this, that's a whole different level of commitment. What if our friendship was one of those things that work great from a distance, but felt weird up close? What if I'd built this moment up so much in my head that reality couldn't possibly match it? I turned my phone to silent mode because I needed this to be real. No interruptions, no distractions, no escape routes. Just me, them, and whatever happened next. The gift bag I'd brought sat in the passenger seat, looking smaller and less impressive than it had when I'd packed it that morning. Some local treats from my hometown, a couple of inside joke gifts, nothing fancy, but it felt important to bring something, you know. You can't just show up empty-handed after a surprise like this. The street was quieter than I'd expected. A few porch lights flickered on as the sun started setting, and I could hear someone's TV through an open window, normal evening sounds in a normal neighborhood, except nothing about this felt normal to me. My heart was doing this weird flutter thing it does when I'm about to do something either really brave or really stupid. Sometimes there's not much difference between the two. I checked the address one more time, comparing the numbers on my note to the mailbox. 1247 Oak Street, perfect match. The cross street lined up with what I'd written down months ago. Even the house color was right. That pale blue with white trim that looked exactly like the background in their social media posts. Everything was exactly as it should be. But sitting there in my car, I realized that all my planning and double-checking couldn't prepare me for the actual moment of walking up to that door and knocking. All those months of saving money, printing directions, and keeping secrets had led to this one moment, and I was about to find out if it was worth it. The porch light seemed to get brighter as darkness settled in around the neighborhood. Time to find out what happens when you turn months of planning into action. Time to discover if some surprises are worth the risk of everything going completely wrong. Standing on that stranger's porch, staring at a closed door with my gift bag dangling like some pathetic peace offering, I felt my brain do this weird thing where it just stopped. You know that feeling when you're so confused that your thoughts literally freeze? That's exactly what happened to me. The porch camera kept blinking its stupid red light, probably recording my complete mental breakdown for posterity. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, and yes, they were actually shaking, which felt ridiculous, but there it was. The address on my notes read clear as day, 428 Oak Street. I looked up at the house number again. 428, check. I squinted at the street sign through the darkness, using my phone's flashlight like some amateur detective. Oak Street. Wait, what? My GPS was still running from earlier, and when I tapped it, the screen showed my current location as Oak Lane, not Oak Street. Oak Lane. I blinked at it about 15 times, convinced the app was glitching. But no, there it was, in bold letters, mocking me with that one tiny word difference that had just ruined 2 months of planning. The worst part? I started laughing. Not the good kind of laughter you share with friends over pizza. This was that hollow, slightly hysterical laugh that happens when your brain can't process how spectacularly you've screwed up something that should have been simple. Here I was, 800 miles from home, standing in front of some random person's house at 9 p.m. with a gift bag full of carefully chosen presents, and I'd managed to get the street name wrong by exactly one word. My heart was doing this weird drumming thing against my ribs, and I could feel sweat gathering on my palms despite the cool evening air. The adrenaline from knocking on that door was wearing off, replaced by the sinking realization that I'd been so focused on keeping the surprise perfect that I'd missed the most basic detail of all. The street name, the actual street name. I walked back to my car like I was in some kind of daze, checking my phone again and again, hoping the GPS would magically change its mind. But technology doesn't lie about stuff like this. Oak Lane and Oak Street were two completely different roads running parallel to each other about 2 blocks apart. Close enough to make an honest mistake, far enough apart to make me feel like the world's biggest idiot. The thing is, I'd triple-checked everything else. The house number, the city, the zip code, all of it matched perfectly with what I'd written down months ago. I'd even looked up the neighborhood on Google Street View to make sure I'd recognize it. But somehow, somewhere in all my careful planning, I'd written down street instead of lane and then spent weeks memorizing the wrong information. The drive to the correct address takes exactly 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like 30 because my brain kept spiraling. What if they saw me through their window, panicking on the wrong street? What if they figured out I was coming and the whole surprise was ruined? What if they weren't even home and I'd driven 800 miles to stare at an empty house on the right street this time? But then I see their car in the driveway. Relief floods through me like cold water on a hot day. They're home. The house number matches my notes perfectly. No room for another Oak Street versus Oak Lane disaster. The porch light glows this soft blue color that makes everything feel more welcoming than that harsh white light from the wrong house. Still, I can't just march up there immediately. Not after what happened 20 minutes ago. I need to be smart about this. Strategic. So I park across the street behind this massive hedge that probably hasn't been trimmed since the Clinton administration. Perfect cover for someone who's already made one rookie mistake tonight. That's when I get this brilliant idea to text them. Nothing obvious, nothing that screams surprise visit incoming. Just a casual "you home?" Like I'm bored and making conversation from 800 miles away. You know, normal Tuesday evening small talk. My phone buzzes back almost instantly. Yeah, just got back from work. Why? Perfect. They're definitely there, and they have no clue I'm lurking behind a hedge like some kind of amateur private investigator. I type back something about being curious about their day, then put the phone away before I overthink it and accidentally give myself away. The waiting is the worst part. I'm cramped in my car, gift bags sitting in the passenger seat looking all innocent and cheerful, while I'm having a full internal debate about timing. Do I wait until they've had dinner? Do I give them time to change out of work clothes? What's the proper etiquette for surprising someone after you've already traumatized their neighbors? Then I see movement through their living room window. The warm yellow light flicks on, and I catch a glimpse of them walking around inside. Real life happening right there, just like I'd imagined during those 8 hours of driving, except now it feels surreal because I'm actually here. Actually watching, actually about to do this thing I've been planning for weeks. My heart starts doing this weird skippy thing again. Not the panicked racing from the wrong house incident, but something different. Anticipation mixed with pure terror. The good kind of terror, if that makes sense. Like right before a roller coaster drops. I grab the gift bag and check my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair looks like I've been driving for 8 hours because, well, I have. But there's no fixing that now. This is happening whether I look perfect or not. The walk from the hedge to their front door feels like walking through molasses. Every step gives me another second to second guess everything. What if they're tired from work and don't want company? What if they're in the middle of something important? What if they think I'm crazy for driving this far without warning? But I'm already committed. I've come too far, literally and figuratively, to chicken out now because of some last-minute anxiety. Besides, the worst thing that could happen already happened at the wrong house. Lightning doesn't strike twice, right? I stand on their porch for exactly 10 seconds, listening to the familiar sounds of their evening routine filtering through the door. The TV murmuring something about weather. Footsteps on hardwood floors. Normal life about to get completely disrupted by my grand gesture. Here goes absolutely everything. Time to find out if surprises are actually as magical as they seem in movies, or if real life has other plans entirely. I knocked softly, 3 gentle taps that said friendly visitor, not crazy person who just embarrassed herself 2 blocks away. My heart was doing that weird flutter thing where you can feel it in your throat, and honestly, I was still shaking off the mortification from earlier. The gift bag felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of my previous failure along with whatever overpriced candle I'd stuffed inside. Then I heard them. The right footsteps this time, not the cautious shuffle of a stranger wondering why some lunatic was at their door, but the familiar sound I'd been driving 13 hours to hear. Quick, excited steps getting louder as they approached. The door swung open, and there they were. Eyes went wide first, then this split second of confusion because their brain was trying to process what shouldn't be possible. I was supposed to be 800 miles away. Remember? I'd literally texted them fake weekend plans just that morning. Something about staying local, maybe hitting up that new restaurant downtown that everyone's raving about. But here I was, grinning like an idiot on their front porch at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. The confusion lasted maybe 2 seconds before it exploded into the most beautiful chaos. A yell, not scared, but pure shock and joy mixed together. Then arms everywhere, pulling me into this crushing hug that made the gift bag crumple between us. Nobody cared about the bag. Nobody cared that I probably smelled like gas station coffee and highway anxiety. What are you doing here? They kept saying, over and over, like saying it enough times would make my presence make sense. I was laughing and trying to explain, but honestly, my explanation was pretty weak. Surprise doesn't really cover the magnitude of lying about your weekend plans and driving across 3 states just to show up unannounced. The best part was watching them process my elaborate deception. They kept shaking their head, saying things like, "You said you were staying local, and I literally believed you were going to that restaurant." I felt a little guilty about the lying, but also ridiculously proud of myself for actually pulling it off. Well, mostly pulling it off. We don't need to discuss the whole wrong house incident that nearly derailed everything. They dragged me inside, still in shock, calling out to anyone else in the house that I was there. More surprised voices, more hugs, more of that wonderful chaos that happens when you successfully ambush people you love. Someone immediately started rummaging through delivery apps because apparently surprising people makes everyone hungry, and honestly, after my diet of gas station snacks and sheer determination, real food sounded incredible. We settled on pizza, which felt perfect. Nothing fancy, nothing that required waiting around or getting dressed up or making reservations, just greasy, satisfying comfort food that we could eat while catching up on everything I'd missed and everything they couldn't believe I'd done. The lies about my weekend plans became the running joke of the evening. They kept bringing it up, marveling at how convincing I'd been, how they'd had zero suspicion that I was plotting this whole elaborate scheme. Made me feel like some kind of mastermind instead of someone who'd nearly knocked on the wrong door and ruined everything. But that's the thing about surprises that actually work. They erase all the near disasters that almost killed them. Nobody needed to know about my GPS mishap or the awkward moment with the stranger or how I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes working up the courage to try again. All they saw was the successful version, the friend who'd driven 800 miles just to spend an evening together. The pizza arrived around 11, which felt late but also perfect. We spread out in their living room, boxes open between us, talking and laughing like we had all the time in the world. Which I guess we did, since I'd already driven this far and wasn't about to rush back. Well, let me break down what I learned, because if you're crazy enough to drive 800 miles to surprise someone, and honestly, you probably are, if you've made it this far into my story, you might as well learn from my mistakes. First thing always, and I mean always, double-check your address with 2 different sources. Don't just trust your phone or that crumpled piece of paper you wrote on 3 weeks ago. I should have called the pizza place nearby and asked them to confirm the street name or looked up the address on one of those real estate websites that shows photos. Anything to make sure I wasn't about to knock on some random person's door at 8 p.m. holding a gift bag like the world's most confused door-to-door salesman. Then there's the timing issue. You'd think showing up unannounced would be spontaneous and romantic, but it's actually kind of selfish when you think about it. What if they'd had plans? What if they were sick or stressed about work or just wanted to eat cereal in their underwear and watch Netflix? I got lucky, they were home, they were in good moods, and they didn't have anywhere else to be. But that was pure chance, not good planning. Here's what I should have done. Sent one of those casual check-in texts earlier in the day. Something like, "How's your Tuesday going?" Or "What are you up to tonight?" Nothing suspicious, just enough to confirm they'd be around and maybe gauge their mood. If they'd responded with "Ugh, worst day ever, just want to hide under a blanket," I could have postponed the surprise or at least brought ice cream instead of whatever random gift I'd packed. And the weird part is, I did think about having a backup plan, but only for big things like car trouble or them not being home. I never considered the small stuff, the tiny details that could derail everything. Wrong street suffix, dead phone battery. Forgetting they'd moved since the last time I visited. Getting lost in their neighborhood because all the houses look identical and street signs are apparently optional in some places. But maybe the biggest thing I learned is that surprises are fragile. They live or die based on about 50 little decisions you don't even realize you're making. The timing of your knock, how you hold yourself when the door opens, whether you lead with an explanation or just grin and let the moment speak for itself. I almost ruined everything by overthinking that first approach, trying to be too smooth instead of just being genuine. The funny thing is, by the time I knocked on the right door, I wasn't trying to be smooth anymore. I was tired, slightly embarrassed, and running on pure stubborn determination. When they opened the door and saw me standing there, I didn't launch into my rehearsed speech. I just smiled and said, "Surprise, I missed you guys." Simple, honest, no performance, no grand gesture speech, just the truth. That's when it clicked for me. The best surprises aren't perfect. They're real. All my careful planning and backup plans and rehearsed words couldn't compete with that moment of genuine connection when someone you care about realizes you drove across 3 states just to hang out with them for one evening. Looking back now, I'm almost grateful for that first wrong door. It knocked me off my script and forced me to be human instead of trying to be some kind of surprise mastermind. Sometimes the best lessons come wrapped in the most awkward moments, even if you don't recognize them until later. But that's not even the craziest part of this whole adventure.